Nope, not even that. What am I doing? I don't know. That's what I'm doing. These are the things that I built this week, and I didn't actually finish my little presentation, so I'm going to do it while we're doing it. And so that should be kind of fun. Or a train wreck, which I'm pretty good at. I do train wrecks very well. But it was a lot of fun building these miniature pieces of furniture because I'm a woodworker, and I'd never really, I don't know, I built little stuff and miniature things. That's what I do. But I'd never really tried to make tiny furniture that I loved. I mean, like really make a nice piece of furniture. So I tried that this week, and I made this little cabinet, and it came out terrible. But I learned a bunch of stuff, and it just basically said, look, don't do that. I tried to take some shortcuts. What I'm going to do now, and what I'm going to show you today, is actually how I build a full-size piece of furniture, but in miniature. And I think that's the best way to do it. Dimensionally, how things line up, all of that is much better. So real quick, I want to say hi to a couple of people. Hello, Scott. Thanks very much for coming in. I really appreciate it. Fancy Potato is here as well. Thank you very much for coming in. Now, folks, here's something that's new. I got a new microphone. It's just right over here. You can't see it. But am I coming in okay? Can everybody hear me okay? I did do a test. I didn't just throw this on you. And it seemed to be working right, but I do have some levels that I can change and set if I'm not coming in right. The other thing that's a lot better is when I go to the live camera that's looking down at the workbench over here, I shouldn't lose you with the sound. I should have real quality sound when I'm talking and explaining how we do this stuff. So yeah, I think it should be a lot better. So thanks very much. Let's look at real quickly these slides because I have just a few things to show you about the stuff that I'm going to show you live, because I think building this, and let me go to the top-down camera real quick. I think building this little trellis or trestle, sorry, not trellis, but trestle style table is something that anybody can do. And it might be a nice introduction to using wood in your model building instead of plastics and things like that. There's nothing wrong with using plastic. You can texture it very nicely to get a really nice wood texture. But gosh, wood is readily available. And I'll talk about the kind of woods that you can use, the ones that are maybe better, sometimes that aren't better for doing this kind of work, and why balsa is really not a great selection for this kind of thing. It's not bad for some applications, but for making a freestanding piece of furniture, not the best idea. So we're going to go into that kind of jazz. The next thing I want to show you is not there, is here. I want to show you a couple of things that I built. So this, and I'm sorry for the screen being kind of wonky, but here's also a chair. Now, I had to not do a chair this week, but I built a chair earlier for my last diorama, and it was a great experience. And I'm putting together some video this week that will kind of help people understand how you make a little chair like that. And I'm gonna be making chairs, so I'll talk about that a little bit too. Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate it. Coming great. And that should be a lot nicer because I noticed this last week, and Mrs. MC's is like, man, you gotta take care of that. And so I got better sound. I made it to the stream. Thanks very much, Jordy. That's wonderful. Thanks very much for coming in. I really appreciate it. So to start off with, why don't we take a look at these slides? I am making this. This is a Dungeons and Dragons playable diorama. And what this came from was, in the past, in building my dioramas, people would comment in and say, man, that would be a lot of fun to play in. And that got me thinking the last time. I said, well, why don't I make actually a playable Dungeons and Dragons kind of a diorama? So that's what this is. Let me go back here. I'm trying to figure out all my things. That's perfect. So here it is. I've got it behind me on the desk. And what you don't see here is the bottom. On the bottom, it continues in pink foam. That pink foam will have a subterranean um, sewage system, like a city sewer system, and an ancient temple, which I'm really excited to get to. But for now, we're just working on Barrett's Coffee House. That is the building on the left, the upside, the top upstairs of that. That is going to be the offices. It's like an accounting office. There's a bridge between the two buildings. The building on the right is the warehouse, and we're going to have a bunch of hard to find things, maybe things of a foggy legal nature to have or to sell or to trade in, which is fun. It's part of the story. And that story is all from this book that I love from back in the 80s. I started reading this and I've read it multiple times. Every year I read it, and lots of times throughout the year I'll just go to it and just say, I'd like to read about that. And it's a lot of fun. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, this is a wonderful book that I would recommend. So the first thing I built, and I'm trying to find the picture here, is a little ballista. And this little ballista is meant to go inside this little room. And it's meant to be something that if somebody encroaches on this room or is getting too close to the guy that's his room, he's got some firepower to get back at him. I was just going to make a crossbow initially. And I'm like, man, I'm just going to go for a ballista. Now, that was a very easy thing to make. And I'll show you a couple of pictures that I have from making it. But this, and I say this in a video that I'm editing right now, this, I believe, though it maybe looks a little complicated, there's a bunch of little parts. Let's put it here in the camera so you can see it. There. It looks like there's a lot of stuff, and maybe that would be harder to build than, let's say, a little cabinet or something like that. And I would disagree with you. And the reason is this. When I'm building something like this, which is kind of where I started my woodworking, I wanted to build those kind of things. Up behind me there, you can see this is a catapult from Da Vinci. I wanted to build this kind of thing, and it's a lot easier because each and every component is simple. So I can work on one little component at a time. I can perfect it. I can get it just right, and then I can add it to the whole. Okay. Well, and there's so many different lines and different arcs and different materials and different things going on. Symmetry is gauged a little bit differently than if you're building this, and that is an issue. And that's something that I ran into this week. So when I'm building this, like I said, a bunch of different parts, it's very actually simple. You make the little part, and it's much like a model builder, plastic modeling. It's much like you're doing. Pardon me. When I'm doing this, look at this. See all those straight lines? Your eye picks up when a line is not straight. And you'll notice the door is cattywampus. The door is not straight. Also, the design. When you're dealing with something like this, it's very recognizable. This is not so recognizable. People are taking kind of your word for it that this is what it's supposed to look like. They've seen it. They know what it is. This is something they're familiar with, but it's not something that they've seen a million times. I believe your eye is trained a little bit more with all the parallel lines, with all of the things that go in it, to notice if it's not quite right. So I took a shortcut last week, and instead of building this in the way I would normally build a cabinet, which is a frame and then add the door and the sides and all that kind of thing, I built a box basically out of very, very thin material, and I appliqued that that door on it. Made it very difficult. It doesn't fit, doesn't look right design wise. And so, again, that's one of the things. Even if you're doing something small like this, you're kind of doing a faux thing. You're not doing a real item, but it's so easy to recognize if it just doesn't look right. I think the sides look fine. I did those, true raised panel. Now they're not period. That's the other thing. But those look okay, but it was that door that just really threw it off. So I'm going to show you how I made all of that. I'm going to show you how I do, it correctly. And we will make the little trestle table, which again, I think is a really easy project and something somebody can do. I got some folks that came on. I want to say hello. Wister's here. Hello, Wister. Cool chair, Bill. Looking forward to the ones you build next. Thanks for doing this episode. You're welcome, and thanks very much, Wister. We've been talking back and forth, as with a lot of you. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about the build this week. I said that when I build something that maybe doesn't come out, I really need to show that too. And that's why this is important. It's not like a total negative. I learned from all this stuff. It doesn't get me down or anything like that. But I want to share with you the learning process, because I can't just build the things that I build right away. Took years. And so if you're looking to get into this, I don't want to make it sound like it's so easy that it just takes no skill. And the first time you do it, you should be able to do it. Not necessarily, that shouldn't be the path that you're looking to take. Please take the time to learn something. If you're getting into something, give yourself that time to, learn how to work with it. There's a different thing about being accurate with a piece of plastic and being accurate with a piece of wood. There's a lot more factors that go into it. And so that's something that we're going to look at today. Paul is here. Thank you very much for coming on, Paul. Sorry for being late. Oh, you're not so bad. I think you're doing fine, sir. Thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate you being here. So, I'm going to get to building and the basic layout of this trestle table, and we're going to start talking right now about actually building it. So I'm just going to go over here and I got to figure out which slide to start on, and we're going to start right here. Perfect. So, and it's not slides, of course. Man. This is walnut, and walnut is a really nice wood to work with. And that's something that we are going to talk about today, is the type of woods and things like that. I've got them all laid out here. Because when you're trying to work with, woods and things like that, some of the woods that are available for modelers or readily available at a model shop may not be a good choice. And this is the specific that I'm talking about. This being walnut, it's pretty dense. It's still got a really nice pattern or grain pattern in it. You can see the grain. It also has some open pores. Can you see that? So the pores in the wood are open a little bit. Any of that is going to add detail. It's going to add some character to whatever you're building. But the number one reason I like using walnut is it machines or cuts very well. Meaning that if I should plane one edge, it's going to be very, very flat. There are some woods that are soft, and we'll look at those, balsa. And when you plane it, because it's so soft, it's harder to cut. It's really hard to cut a piece of paper with a really sharp knife, right? But it's actually a little bit harder or easier to cut something that's not a piece of paper, that's not so flexible. It's stiffer, so you can cut into it. But the same thing with this wood. When I'm trying to get detail out of this wood, it's pretty important to use a wood that can hold the detail. So why don't I show you this real quickly? Sorry about that. This is the walnut, and here is some balsa. Now, the balsa here, this is a readily available wood. It works great for a lot of applications. It still has the grain, you know, like the walnut. That's really nice. But here's what I want you to do. Take your thumbnail and push into there. And can you see that? I don't know how well that's coming through, but I can dent that with my thumbnail. I can't do that on the walnut. And the reason that's important is when I try to do something like this on the walnut with this, this is some beaded trim. When I try to do beaded trim on this, the wood has to be able to hold up to that detail. This is a very, very small. It's about 1/4 of an inch wide. It's about 1/16 of an inch thick, and it's got a rounded bead right on the corner. So looking at that rounded bead, this will focus in a second. Looking at that rounded bead right there on the top, it's unfortunately just impossible to do with a hand tool that same kind of a thing on balsa, even because it's of its softness. So it's not dense enough. So that's a good wood for what we're trying to do. You can tell the density of a wood sometimes by hitting it. It's very, very snappy, the sound. See, that's not. It's just a lot softer. So what we're doing here is I'm trying to make first on this. I know I'm jumping around a little bit. Sorry about that. What I want to make first on here is the leg parts of it. That's the most complicated thing. And so let me switch back here to here. The leg is like the most complicated part. And because it's the most complicated part, that's typically where I want to personally start out. Gosh darn it. There we go. And so what I'll do, I'm going to stop my autofocus on there. Sorry, folks. What I'm going to do is just show you how I do that. So the first thing I do is I cut the little pieces to the length that I want. I'll stack them up, and then I'll tape them together. By taping them together here, and they're all, you know, even, I've even got 2 extra pieces in case I mess one up. Next, I'll draw my design. Now, I'm going to come out a little bit on this because the thing I want to illustrate here is that I'm not drawing this pattern on here even. If you look in the picture here, this line right in the middle, that's basically the middle from the top and the bottom. For the table, I want the base to be a little bit heavier or bigger than the top. That's just a design. It's also going to help it sit properly. It's going to look proper to the eye as well. So you see that vertical line off to the right, that is the middle. I'm shifting everything up so that the foot is larger than the top. Once I've done that, then I'll come in, and this picture, this is what I was doing when you know, I started. I was a little bit late. What I'm doing here is I take this over to my bandsaw and I cut this out. Now, I've got a terrible video that I'm going to show you, handheld, and here it is. And I'm actually doing this, and I'm viewing this through my phone, and so it's really, I don't recommend this at all. And one of the things I think that can happen if you get overconfident in your abilities is you can get injured. I don't, by the way, in this. But this is how I do it. When I'm not trying to film it, I'm doing it with both hands and very carefully. The sideways motion on the bandsaw is something that if you're not pressing forward, you can kind of whittle away a little bit of that wood. And because this is all stacked, all of it's getting cut at the same time. So this is what it looks like after I brought it back from the bandsaw. And then it's important to kind of clean it up. You'll notice that I haven't cut all the way to the line. And I think that's really important here. I don't want to cut so that, I'm not, and I've got the real article here. I don't want to cut and then that's my final. What I want to do is this next part, I want to use some files and I want to smooth this. And if I don't do that, as I work it a little bit later on, the next parts that we'll go into, it'll literally break just because it's not been sanded. It sounds kind of weird, but on thin material like this, if it's not sanded, you leave fractures in the wood open. And so just moving it or working with it, it can make this stuff snap off. One of the properties of the wood, because I've got the grain oriented this way. Remember, we looked at the grain here, the grain of the stripes going up and down the wood. Well, wood is much more stronger this way, in this direction going across grain. I can bend it like this, so wood's stronger that way. But if I try to do that same bending this way, this would just snap in half. So you got to be careful about that when you're working with wood. So these little tiny feet that I cut on here, if I don't sand this, and I'm going to show you how to do it, if I don't sand that and I take this apart out of this block and I start working with them, those little things just snap right off. By sanding it, kind of seals up the edge, closes the fracture in the wood, the edges, and you're going to deal with a much better part. So now we're going to watch how I clean this up. So you can see there, I'm just taking some files. I've got this on the bench. And when I'm doing this, pardon me, I'm going pretty slow. I'm not really going at it, I'm not just hammering this thing. I'm taking my time. These files, and these are common files that everybody has. I think that these files are going to take off a lot more than you would imagine. Like here, I'm going a little bit hard. That's it. That completely flushed up the edge of it. So now that I have this all done, I'm going to go back to my pictures, because what I want to do is I want to take that in our narrative here. I've only done one side. Let me go back to our pictures. See, I've only done the one side, then I cleaned it up. Well, the next thing I need to do is I need to take this, I take them all apart and I flip one over. And that's, it's not like I'm figuring out something crazy, but that's just the process. It allows you to get the same thing on the other side. I mark it off, but there is something to note here. If you're looking at this right here, it's not exactly what I want to cut. Because I marked on the outside of this over here on the left side, when I flipped it over the other piece and put it here, these lines, I have to basically remark on the inside of them, because if I did this, it wouldn't match because of the width of the pen. So, you could probably figure that out if you've ever done this kind of thing, but I figured that was nice to mention. I don't want you to think that that's the only thing I do. I flip it over, then I go to that line. I actually rescribe everything. Okay, so once you've got both sides cut, once you've got them sanded very nicely, now we can take this off. Now we're going to go here and we'll go with the rest of them, and I'm going to do everything else live. I couldn't really do that live. So let me see if I can get the right camera coming up here. So I'm going to open these guys up, and I did 6. I wanted, when I made these, I made 2 at a time. And I think it's a really good idea just because of the process, stacking these ends to cut them like I did here. It makes a lot of sense to do more than 1 at a time. So all of these are basically the same now, but I do think it's a good idea to use 2 at a time that are close to each other, in the stack. So I'm going to set these aside right now. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to retape just these two because I need to put a slot right there. And if I try to do a slot in here, it's very easy. I'm sorry, it's not focusing. I need to watch what I'm doing here. There it is. If I try to do a slot in here and I'm not careful, again, remember the thing with the grain, I can split it. And something like this is very easy to split because I'm going to make that slot with the grain. So by taping it, that will help. Even everything up just like before. I've got a little blue tape over here. And I'm going to be working basically in the middle of this. So I'm going to put my tape on the ends. Okay, like so. I don't need those sides so much. And another one over here. But I do want it over the end. Now, that's not going to prevent it from splitting, but that will help if it splits. I won't lose the piece, you know, and I can glue it back on. That actually happened with building one of these, and you can't tell. So the next thing I'm going to do is before I make that slot, I need to drill. By drilling it out and then connecting the dots, basically, that's the best way to do this. If I tried to go in here with my little chisel, it would, because the chisel, you know, it's like a wedge. It would just push this thing apart. So by drilling this, that's the best way. I eyeball pretty much everything. So if I want to find the center of this, I just kind of, you know, go like that and go like that. And when I start, I look where I start, and then I look where I end, and then I hit it. Then when I'm here, I go, that's the middle, just like that. So it's non-scientific. I mean, I could, you know, get a bunch of stuff out, but I don't think it's necessary. Oh, one other thing. This is a block of balsa wood, and it is fantastic for working on your bench when you want to drill through something. You don't want to necessarily drill into this, but by drilling into this, I won't blow this out so much on the bottom, and I won't damage my bench so much. So I am going to go in here, and right about there, I'm just going to come down and drill this hole. Now, this is a harder wood, so it will go a little slower than balsa, but it'll still work pretty darn good, pretty fast. I try to define both ends of the slot that I'm going to make. Get that out of there so you can see it better. I define both ends of the slot that I want to make. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to take out the middle. And I'm going to still keep it taped. And I don't want to go in there aggressively. There we go. I think you can see a little better. I don't want to go in there aggressively and just punch it through. I have to take this stuff out very slowly. So you see I'm coming in from the side and from the side. And you see the angle of my chisel? It's pretty low. Each progressive cut, I'm just going to bring this up a little bit higher and go a little bit deeper. But I'm going slow. See? I'm not really going in there super fast. Taking my time. So that's pretty much all the way through. Now we go to the back side. Same thing. I'm going to get, I don't have to take out that. I could just leave that in there. Remember, start out real shallow and then increase your angle. I can do a much higher angle here because of the chisel's angle. And then we just get steeper angle as we go. And then finally, we're just going straight down. I'm not forcing it because this is wider than the slot I'm making. If I push down there through hard, it will go all the way through and split this. So I'm going really careful. Okay, so now I think we've got just about everything out of there. Now I'm going to go to my little files. I'm going to start with my round one, and I'm just going to try to get the debris out of there first. Okay. So there's all my debris gone. Then I'll come in with my wide one, and I'm not trying to make the hole or the slot any larger. I'm trying to make the slot cleaner. Okay, so I'm not going in there really hard, just gently hitting those sides to try to make sure it's a nice profile. Okay, I'm not gonna go long at all. As a matter of fact, doesn't take much at all. If you've got these sharp tools, it doesn't leave a frayed end. And there we go. We got a slot through both of them, and they match. So now we'll take this off. And there are the two sides for my table. Now we need a stretcher. Now here's the top. We're going to do the top pretty much last. The stretcher is this part that goes right here. And it looks very simple. It is, but there's a very specific thing. I need my stretcher material, my base material, to be larger than my slot that I made. Okay, so this has to be larger than that because I'm going to make a stop. If you look here, I'm going to make sure this thing is focusing properly. Sorry about that. If you look here, what I do is I come up with a larger shoulder here than on the outside, so that gives it a nice stop. So when I press this through there, it stops and it helps with the rigidity. That stretcher keeps these legs from folding this way or that, you know. And then when I glue it to the top, then you're done. So I'm going to come in here. I've been taking all my measurements off here. They were very random. I did not measure any of these, but I'm going to set that there. I have a pencil somewhere right next to my hand. I'm going to go in there just like that. And it's not necessarily that I can't use the top same length. I've done that before, but I do want a little bit shy of the top. I don't want that stretcher and the ends of the stretcher to come out there. I want it to be a little bit shy. So that's why I marked it off of that stretcher. Once I've got that, I like to use, and this is new. For years, I used the X-Acto knife or saw, and it comes in a a dual kit, and it's very fine, and it's great. Gosh, you can cut brass, you can cut plastic, you can cut everything. I mean, a model builder, most of us have this. And I would cut wood with this. The problem is these teeth are so fine, they're not really made for wood. This, on the other hand, is a Japanese Dozuko. I'm so sorry. I do not wish to mispronounce that. But this is made for cutting wood, and it works really well. It's virtually the same thickness. Well, it's maybe a little thicker than the X-Acto knife. And so you're not going to really lose anything by using this. So if you're using wood, this is about a $40 saw. This is not an expensive saw. It's a very good saw. And I would recommend one if you're looking for one. What I want to do with this that's different is on my my little cutting jig here. This is called a miter box because you can cut 45-degree angles, you can cut 90-degree angles and stuff like that. But what I want to do on an American-based saw, because the teeth are pointed away from you and you cut primarily on the push stroke on an American saw. I want to do that differently on a Japanese saw and move it to the back side of my miter box because I cut with a Japanese saw on the pull stroke. So the blade, the little teeth are pointed to the rear. And it works very nice. So I'm going to place this in here. There's my mark right there. I'm going to give myself room to true it up after I'm done. I don't try to cut right on the line because it's too easy to go ahead and just destroy your line and then it's too short. So I just bring it in there and I'm not pressing down. I just have to impress that enough. I'm not pressing down. I'm just pulling and pushing the saw. And the teeth on the saw, just that quickly, are going to go right through that. This is a little bit harder wood than balsa, of course, but it's still going to cut through there with no effort. And I think that's the biggest issue I used to have before I learned is I would try to, put weight down on the saw when I'm cutting. And that's the number one thing not to do. You don't need the weight. You need to give the teeth a chance to clear away the material they're cutting. And the only way you can do that is just by letting the teeth cut. So now that is a little bit long. The other thing I like to do, I said, is I like to trim my stuff myself. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just taking that off. So now I've got to take off. That's about, as thick as it is. That's about a 16th of an inch. I don't want to take the whole thing off. I'm taking shavings and I'm just walking them back. And that's the way to do it. If you take too much and you try to cut too much off at one time, what happens is you crush the wood. Your tool doesn't want to cut if it's going just like if I were back here trying to push through there. It starts to crush the wood a little bit, dulls your tip and all kinds of stuff. So you're just taking down here and look at, I'm not hardly holding it, and I'm just letting the sharpness of the blade cut. Okay, so I've trimmed it back. The next thing I want to do is I want to figure out where I want my stops. So the stops are going to be back the thickness of this plus half that again. Okay, so that's just my own thing. I can do it just like this. So I go half the distance from that out, and then with my elusive pencil, I can come in here and I mark my shoulder just like that. Okay, doesn't take a lot. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to mark where my shoulder is going to stop. Now, you may say, why am I doing this right on the wood piece? This is how I woodwork. I do my woodworking right on the work piece. Whether it's a big thing I'm working on or small, I do my markings right on the work piece. So I line them up properly. I can then go in here and then mark where that shoulder needs to be. It's just a little bit. It's not a lot. Then I'll take this. Got another one. This is a little bit larger chisel here. And all I'm going to do is I'm just defining the line. I don't want to press in. I just want to define the line right there. Okay. Same thing here. I just want to define the line just right there. I'm going to check it. So it's a little bit further back, but that's okay than I was thinking. So now that I've defined my line, I'm going to come up here and just cut. When you're cutting something this small, by either marking, and I've got a small marker here, okay, it's a little chisel point marker that I can either mark in there, or just by using the chisel, what I'm doing is I'm telling the wood, I don't want you to split past that point, because if I don't mark these, they could split past those points very easily. So because I chipped that off, now I'm coming in here. See that? I can come back and just chisel that right away, come back and define my line. Now I've got this beautiful little shoulder right on the end. Let's do the other side. Remember, I come back and I define that line first. Come back in here and just chopping it away, little bits at a time. It's not taking any force whatsoever. Going straight down. So now I have my shoulder. It's not ready to go on my slot yet. I still need to round those over. They're also a little crooked. See, they're a little bit in and like this. So I'm going to come back here like this. I'm trying to do it so you can see it. And I'm just cleaning those up. I want them completely straight. If it looks like a wedge and it goes in that slot, again, you'll put too much pressure on that joint and you can split that wood. So now they're nice and clean, nice and squared up. Now I got to round them over again. You can do it with this, just like that. You're just going to come in here, 45-degree angle on each of the corners that are on that little through, that are going to go through the other slot. I'm just going 45 degrees on each of those corners. Come back, cut that away. And I'm, it's so small. I'm just not using hardly any pressure here, but it's doing a great job of cutting. These are quite sharp. Now I'm going to take my file. Now here's the issue. A file is not what you should define a shape with. This is for cleaning and all that kind of stuff. All I'm doing here, and I don't want to round this over this way or anything like that. All I'm doing is rounding this way. See, toward you. Very slowly, very carefully. Because if I get too aggressive, it's so small, you can make mistakes, but they're kind of hard to recover from because you don't have, okay, let's put it this way. You're magnifying any mistake because it's so small. So a little test fit. It's not quite wide enough. So this is a little bit thicker. I got two options here. I can thin it out or I can make the slot larger. I just want to thin it out a little bit because I don't think it's too much bigger. So just a little bit of sandpaper. We're not there yet. So I am going to bring this open a little bit. Now, one of the things about doing these slots in here is there's a transition from the straight to the rounded edge. Well, that's what we did here. So now we're rounded there. Now we just need to make sure that these straights, number one, don't cut into that round because you'll see it, but they're just wide enough to accept the entire piece. That's mostly determined by the drill bit I used, but I can open it up a little bit by doing this. Are we there? There we are. So I'm being really careful, but I am kind of pushing that in there. The other thing that happens when you're working with wood, I don't know if you can see it, is when you test fit things, you will, if something's a little bit tight, I'm going to see if I can get really close and show this. When you're test fitting something and something gets tight, you see that little shine right there, right on the tab? See that shine? That is caused, hey, it's me. That's caused by the wood rubbing on the other wood. You look for that because that's where it's tight. That's where it's too small. That's where it's making contact. If you don't see that shiny bit, if you're here and you don't see the shiny on that little tab right there, see that? I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this to focus for you. If you don't see that little shiny bit, you're not making contact. So I want to make contact all the way around. Okay. So now we'll get the focus back here again. I can put that in there. And that is one side of my stretcher. The other side is the same thing. I'm just going to check the thickness. Yeah, the thickness of this one's a little bit bigger. So we're going to do the same thing. Set it there. Mark my shoulders. And then this is something that I use all the time. I didn't use it this time, but when I want to duplicate that shoulder, I can come in here with this tool. I loosen this little knob right here. That frees up this little bar. And on the end of that bar, That is a cutter wheel. Now, this is a miniature one. It's the exact same tool as this. See, like that? It's a better example. That little bar comes out. It's got a cutting wheel on the end of it, and it can mark a depth. And around it, I use it a lot. I'm actually going to show you, just because this is an old style marker. And this old style marker, boy, I'm sorry, my camera work sucks. This old style marker is what people have used for eons, which is kind of brilliant. So anyway, what I'm going to do back here is I am going to set the depth of that shoulder, because I want it to be the exact same as the other one. I tighten that down, that little knob there. Now I can go over here, and remember when I defined those before? Look at this. I can use that to define my shoulders, and they're 100% the same. Now, I could have done that from the start with these two, but figured I'd show you two ways. So I'm going to mark those a little bit more, define them a little bit more. Here's a big one. Remember, I marked my shoulders here, you know, where they need to come this direction and here, but I still need to mark here. And by mark, cut is what I mean. And so I need to cut there. If I don't cut there, it could split all the way back here and I'll lose my shoulder. So I need to cut there. Did it on the last time. I just want to make sure you understood I did that. Okay. Then I'm going to mark those just like that. And now I can start, see, cutting them right away. Straight up and down. Nice shoulder. Same thing over here. Cut straight down, just whittling it away a little bit at a time. There we go. Nice square shoulders. I'm going to hit those 45. Oh, I got it. This one's not quite as square. I need to square that up a little bit. I'm going to hit these with a 45. Now, you don't have to do the 45, okay? You can go straight to the file. But I would caution you, because if you don't, then you're dealing with an edge that it's a lot easier to get uneven. When I'm making these little cuts, I'm coming straight down that little tongue that I made, that little, I'm going to, you know, put that in there. I'm coming straight down. If I don't have that there, when I move to the file, I could be off or an angle or something like that. So by doing that 45, it already starts the proper arc that you want to create. And then it's a very careful all the way around. And let's see how we did. So there, let's see if I got them right. There we go. There we have a stretcher. Now you're fine. You could leave it right there, but to lighten this thing up, and by lighten it up, I mean, see how big it is? It's just this big, huge board. To lighten it up aesthetically, you can, and physically, because, you know, you would use less wood, it would be lighter. You want to cut these back. It looks more aesthetically pleasing, but it also lightens the whole thing up. You know, these things were meant to be heavy, but gosh. So I am just going to come in here, and a lot of times, remember I said you can use this marker and you set a depth, so I could hit this on either side and get a parallel line. But I think we do this a lot, you know, just as builders and stuff like that, creators. You know, you just use your finger as your index. I don't want to be smaller than these or much smaller than those tabs. So I'm going to set that, and then I'm going to set right here and just kind of go like that. And I'm just using my finger to offset to get my parallel lines there. And that'll give me a shoulder if I cut these back, and then I cut this other stuff away. And I'm just going to do an angle there, an angle there. I don't want to come all the way to the little tip here. I want to bring it back, and I know you can't see that. I'm sorry. I should have thought that one out a little bit better. But that shoulder, I don't want to bring this angle of this shoulder completely to the end. I want to, should I be drawing things? Yes, I should. I want to do this. Here's my shoulder. Okay. That is my shoulder. So I have a line here that I'm going to cut away this part here. I don't want my line to go from here to that. I want my line to go from here to that. So I need to leave all that wood there. If I do it all the way to there, chances are it's going to chip away. You're going to lose your entire shoulder. So when I cut, I want to do that. I'll leave all that wood there so you have a much better shoulder, a much stronger shoulder. So when I make these cuts, I'm coming back from that line, and that's where I'm making that cut so I have a proper shoulder. I'll do the same thing on this side. And again, we want to be careful because if I go a little bit too fast on this stuff, you know, you're working on these things and man, you can just mess it up and have to start over again, which I've done plenty of times, but just take your time. I hope nobody minds that I'm taking my time. So there you go. I've got a nice parallel line cut there. By defining these lines, again, what I'm doing is I'm keeping the wood from splitting when I go to cut it later. I could just draw in there and just start cutting. And if I lay into this thing with an X-Acto blade, it's just going to split. I'm going to lose my shoulders, all of that. So you just got to take your time. Here I'm defining both sides because it's just a much bigger cut. And so I'll just do that on both sides here. Okay, looks a little awkward, but see, I've got cuts there now. Now I'm going to bring these in. I'll define those just like before. Not going all the way. Just like that. And now, because I've got a cut on the opposite side, look at, I can just push straight down. And when I get here, I want to make sure I can get that, and it just separates that. Look at that. So there's my angle. I still have my shoulder. I've got a relatively straight cut there, and the angle come back. I'll have to sand that, sure, but by making those relief cuts, I did not destroy this and have to start over. Okay. So I can do some sanding. But before I do the final finish, I'll use a file and I'll show you how I do that. Okay. So all the cut sides have been sanded. This needs a little bit more because remember, after I cut it, by sanding it, it kind of seals up any of those fractures, makes it a little easier, keeps it from splitting more. You could do that with scraping too. You know, I use a lot of scrapers. This is a scraper. It's just a piece of spring steel. The end becomes super sharp. There's a way to do that. I'm not going to go into it. But then you just scrape along there before sandpaper. This is what you use for smoothing. So I've got all the sides now sanded, but they're not done. One of the things that I did here was I rounded over everything, and it's so small I can't really do it with a router or anything like that, so you got to do it by hand. But there's a very easy way to do it, and that is with a round file. So this is again a small jeweler's file. I think everybody has these if you're into modeling. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to like kind of come in here and round over like this and stuff. I'm going to try to do just this wiping motion. See what I'm doing? and I'm varying the angle just a little bit. I'm just letting it fall off of that edge. This is kind of loose. My hand is loose, you know. This is not really tight, and I'm just letting it fall off the edge. And what it's doing, whoops, is flying out of my hand. No, what it's doing is it is rounding that edge over. It's finding its own way. I'm not forcing it, and it does just a great job. Same thing on this side. I'm going to go this way. And I don't know that you can see it all that well, but man, that rounds beautifully. I mean, it looks like there's a little tiny router that you put on there. This is a fine file, so it's not, you know, digging into it. I have other files. I couldn't use this one. This one would literally just dig into there. That's the one we use to define the shape. This one is very fine. You know, there's not a lot of grit there. Very fine teeth, and it's just taken off the corner just beautifully. So I'm going to do that now on all these sides. I'm not going to do it to the top. I'm not going to do it to the bottom. Those are going to be glued to surfaces. So I'm just doing it on these decorative parts that we've cut in here. Sorry, I'm trying to get this thing. Kind of go in there. And I promise I'll pay attention to comments here in a second. I'm very sorry, folks. I've not been paying attention. But as soon as I get this done, we will do it. See that fuzz? I just kind of come back and get that. But those ends are rounded very nicely. Now, it's not like they had routers back then, but you don't want to have any sharp edges. We talked about that a lot last week. We don't want to have any sharp edges on wood. It can snag your clothes. It can, like if somebody has a sweater, whatever, it opens up the edge. You can break it. You know, it can peel right off. So you do want to sand, and you do want to take care of any sharp edges. I'll do the same thing here and go a little bit faster, and I'm just rounding them over. I'm not trying to change the profile. I'm just trying to round it over. And it'll look a lot more scale that way if you just round it over instead of really, you know, go bonkers on it and like try to do the 70s oak furniture round over. Okay, there you go. So I got to do the other one, but we're gonna look at some comments here real quick. Okay, let's see. I got some folks talking. Bobbity, Wister, we talked. Paul Christopher, hello. Paul Sleazen's here. Hello, Sleazen. Thanks very much for coming in. Better late than never. Absolutely. Homefront Forge is here too. Just say hello. I watched the Olympic Games ceremony. Wow. I want to watch that a little bit later on too. And then Jordy says, what size pencil lead are you using for marking? 0.5 or 0.7 or something else? 0.5. Pardon me. When I do like all my pens and stuff like that, it's always 0.5, but I also have some different colored leads. White, you can get white lead and red lead. So try to find those too. Those are great. Okay, let's get back to this. I am going to get you right in the home stretch. Actually, why don't we do the top? So once I've got that, because I think you know what else I got to do here. Once I do that, then I've got the top. Now, the top seems very, very simple, and it is. But there's a couple of things. There's always a couple of things. I'm going to line this up just like before, right there. I've got my line to the right. The old adage, measure twice, cut once. So that's right in there. I'm just letting the saw its own weight do the cutting. I'm only holding and supporting it straight up and down to get a nice, vertical cut. And there you go. The issue with the top is I want to find my nice side, number one, but I do want to do a round over edge on here. Whoops, sorry, I'm going to get that off of there. Right on, Jordy. Thanks. So I want to round this over, and there's a few ways of going about that. Because I want a fairly good sized round over, I'm going to use my little hand plane to start that. And there's a couple of things that you want to be careful about. Number one, I like to do stuff like I'm just holding it in my hand, but it's a much better idea to have it supported on something flat. Number two, if I'm doing end grain, I want to make sure that I skew the plane. If I do something like this, what it has a tendency to do is as it gets out here, it'll want to pull something away. It'll want to chip out that corner. But if I have it skewed, it doesn't mean that's completely alleviated, but it's a lot lesser incident of it. So I want to come in here skewed on the edge and then just kind of come right across like that. Okay. See that it didn't push out the side. I'll do the same thing. I'm going to do all my work on the top side initially. Okay. So once I do the ends, I do the sides after the fact. Because once I do the ends, if I did have any tear out, then I could come back here and I could take off the tear out. So I did 2 strokes on the ends. I'm doing 2 strokes on the side. You want to do the same. It's going to take pretty much the same amount off each time it goes. So if I do 2 here, I'm going to do 2 there. So I try to be even with that. Once I've started that round over, then I can just go like the sanding disc or sanding stick. If I could locate a sanding, see, it's right in front of me. And then again, nothing crazy. I'm just moving back and forth along the grain. Now I can go back and forth on the sides because of the grain. Sorry, I got to restart this. If I go back and forth here, think of the end of this like a broom, like the end of a broom, and it's got bristles. And so if you go back and forth, the bristles just keep going like that. So what you want to do on the end of wood, on the end grain, you're just going to go one direction. And so I'm just going in one direction, and it'll smooth much faster than if you go back and forth. You can also go off the end like this, but it's harder to kind of maintain the arc. It's a lot easier to maintain the arc by doing it this way, going over the edge. So we do the other side. And I like to do the top first so I can have a nice contrast from the bottom, because we're going to do the bottom too, but it's going to be much less. You do want a difference between the top and the bottom. On a regular table, the bottom is typically more flat so that when you reach your fingers under it, you have something to grip. You don't want a completely rounded bottom edge on a table because your fingers have nothing to grip, if it's completely rounded. So you'll notice on furniture, the bottom of furniture is much sharper, and that's so you can lift it. So you want to mimic the same thing here. So I want to do the same actions, but you notice I didn't do this because I'm not going to do as much. I'm just going to take off the sharpness. It's still much sharper than the other side, but I don't want it as rounded as the other side. There we go. So there we go. So there's your top, and that's a proper top. Now, I probably want to knock at a 45-degree angle. See, I'm hitting it at a 45-degree angle here. I'm just going straight down, getting the sharp off of those. If you want to do a finish on these, I did spray TS. What is it? It's the semi-gloss, which is 79, I think. Yeah, so I did TS79 on this, which I thought was very nice, multiple coats. And so if you do want to do that, that's fine. The other thing you can do before you finish this is you can use steel wool on it, but because of the grain, sometimes the steel wool will get impregnated inside the little pores. So you have little steel wool. So you got to be careful there. But sand this thing down to about, I start with 150, probably go down to 220, maybe 320 or 300, something like that. I wouldn't necessarily have to go to 400, but that'll give you a really nice top. These were hardly sanded. These were just sanding sticks, and it's just got a beautiful look to it. Okay, we're just about done, folks. I am not going to sand this one yet. I can do it after the fact, after it's mounted, because I want to see this thing mounted. I'm just going to place those in there. And remember, I've got a top and a bottom of these. The top is a little bit more shallow. It's not as heavy, not as bulky. The bottom is bigger, so I want to make sure I don't mess that up. Those go in there like so. Before I mount this on here, I want to make sure this thing is not cattywampus. This thing should sit flat. If it's all, you know, not sitting level before I put it on here, it ain't going to help by putting it on there. So this wood moves. Wood is not as I guess strong or stringent as you might think. It will move. So you want to make sure that this thing is correct before you put it on there. So I am going to take this. I use medium super glue on this. And the only reason is because it's faster. I would typically want to use, oh, that's clogged. I would typically use wood glue on any wood, like I said last week, and it works great. But on these, this is okay. It's not bad. It's not going to hurt it. Okay, so let's get a little bit on there. Man, I am having a heck of a time with my glue. Might have to go with a different glue. Okay, so on there like so. Come on, glue. There we go. And I'm really globbing it on. I want to take some of that off. Here we go. And that is much better. Now, the nice thing about this kind of glue, the CA glue, is if I do get messy with it, it's not going to really matter because it's not going to mess with the finish of the clear. That's nice. Actually, the wood glue would mess with the clear finish. Now, I am just eyeballing it, but I'm pretty happy with that. If I don't use accelerator on here, I don't know that that's true. I feel like it's a little stronger bond. I use accelerator all the time, but sometimes I feel like, man, is that as strong of a bond as if I didn't use accelerator? I have no facts to back this up. It's just a pondering. But there we go. I'm going to hold that there for a little bit. One of the things that I use on the bench a lot are fishing weights. So these are 5-ounce and 6-ounce fishing weights, and I've dipped them in Dip It because they're lead, and I don't necessarily want to touch lead. But they're really great for doing stuff like this. And the shape allows me to stack them on stuff and helps with drying and stuff like that. So I do that all the time, and I like it quite a bit. So how are we doing? That's got to glue up. There's one other part that goes on these, which is just like a little foot. And that little foot is just a cut piece, and you just glue it on. I think it's a really attractive little table. I think it works pretty darn good. It's real easy to make. If you've not done, wood in your model building before, you might really enjoy it. My background in woodworking makes it almost like a natural for me to go into it. And there are certainly things about woodworking that are worth learning that are so transferable to model building and design work, and like the diorama that you want to build and realizing the full vision of it, that if you've just got a little bit of interest, I think woodworking would be a lot of fun. I think as a model builder or a diorama builder, it's like I said before, it's kind of a natural extension, but I think that it can enhance it. It can enhance it to make, I guess, something a little bit deeper. If I'm buying kits all the time, I'm going to be buying the same kits as other people. And yes, it's my own interpretation, but it's funny how many times I see, now that I've been doing this a number of years, how many times I see the same figure or the same model part or kit part that I've built in the past and used maybe differently, but somebody else is using. And it's neat. I'm not saying that's negative at all. It's neat. It's like, hey, I know that kit, or I built that figure, and that's fun. And to see how somebody else treated that same figure is neat. But I can promise you there is exactly one of these on the planet, even though I made two at a time, and here's the other one. They're both completely unique. And there's one of these on the planet, and there's one of these on the planet, and I made them both, and you can do the same thing. There's something kind of fun in that, you know. Somebody can take your idea, and that's not a negative, because I'm working with other people's ideas when I design stuff like that. But if you build something like this, or something like this, or something that you build for your diorama from scratch, there's virtually one of them, period. And I like that. It's just kind of fun. Plus, I enjoy building. I'm purely a builder. My whole craft life is about building because it's fun. It just, you're trying to figure stuff out. And I've had an amazing amount of help in this particular project, even this week, from a gentleman named Winston Smith. And thank you, Winston, for all your help. Winston apparently knows a heck of a lot more about medieval buildings, furniture, construction, the names of it, than I do, which is not a stretch. But all joking aside, I really appreciate it, because Winston has been coming back and saying, hey, look up this. One of the things I didn't, now I knew that a raised panel, which is what I did when I built this little armoire, I knew they didn't have raised panels back then, because I've got some examples of medieval furniture armoires, in drawings. As a matter of fact, I've got some books here to show you if I ever get there. But I knew that this was not period, but it was what I knew how to build. Okay. And raised panels, raised panel doors, and raised panel sides and stuff like that. It's very used. But like Winston said, look, that was 200 years later that they come up with that. Fair point. But it was something that I knew how to build, and I just wanted to do it because this was the very first thing that I built in scale furniture wise, was this. And so I just wanted to kind of get my feet wet. It was a great experience. I used all mahogany. It looks okay. It doesn't look terrible, but it certainly doesn't look like something that I want to show as an example of what I do. But I can use it in the attic, and that's what I'm going to do. But I guess the point is, it gave me the confidence to say, yeah, I will go forward with this. I will take something that I know pretty darn good, and I will now try to mimic and build the exact stuff that they had back in those medieval times. I don't know that I could really have done that until I did this, because the other thing that I did, and I said this early on, was I kind of built a little box, which is not how you would build a armoire, but I built a box and I slapped the door on the front of it. That right there inherently was an issue in the structural integrity of trying to line things up. And that's one of the biggest things you see about it, is it's not lined. That door is out of womp. This side of the door is lower than this side. So, yeah, I mean, use that kind of stuff and find what works for you. And as I go through this, I'm going to show you the mistakes and the stuff that I learned in doing it. Again, my familiarity with woodworking is helping, But I think that if you're getting into this and you go through some of these steps and you're doing your research and you're looking online and you're looking for woodworkers that know what they're doing, I think you can come to the exact same result that I've come to, and improve as you go by building more of them too. Scott says, looks really good, Bill. Are you going to distress the tables like dents, knife marks and such, or leave them pristine? I'm not sure. So that's a very good point. When I was a kid, we used to have a pizza place called Shakey's, and Shakey's was great. It was Shakey's Pizza, and it was thin, super thin, great pizza. And they had these big benches in there, and they showed like black and white Harold Lloyd movies and, you know, funny movies like that, Keystone Cops and all that kind of stuff, and just like a player piano going. It was a really, really fun experience. And it was supposed to be set in a medieval building. And so they did the interior decorating all medieval, you know, big beams and stuff like that. But it was a pizza joint. I remember that as a kid. If you're maybe from the Pacific Northwest, you remember them. They were around here. I don't know where else they were from. But, and Jordy says, yeah, I loved Shakey's. So Shakey's was wonderful. In those tables, those long bench tables and stuff, people would literally carve their names into it. So I have these memories of watching old movies and going to Shakey's as a very small child of medieval times. That is what draws me into it. So yeah, I think I should distress them, Scott. And I think I should mark some things in there because that's, you know, that's what happened. Now, that doesn't mean that all of them be like that. There is a special place in Barrett's Coffee House. That's Barrett's Coffee House. There's a special place where it's like the higher end clientele. And this higher end clientele, they are upstairs in the balcony and they actually pay for their tables there. They pay for their seats. And so these business people and traders and stuff like that are up there, you know, they trade in commodities and goods and things like that, gold, silver, wheat, whatever. They have to have like a really nice place. So I'm going to do round pedestal tables. One of the things that Winston was talking about was a Jacobian, or was it Wister? Wister might. I don't mean to get you messed up, and I don't believe I have. So I think it was Winston that said it. To do a Jacobian pedestal table. And it basically is a little tiny round pedestal table, which would work in a cafe with 2 chairs. And it has a barley twist, which is not hard to do in big. It takes a time, and I've done them before. But where's the wood I prepped? That's what I'm going to try to make one out of. And that's much bigger than the final barley twist is going to be. The final barley twist is probably going to be on the lines of that big around. So I've got a lot of extra room there, but I needed that to lay it out and to start it. So I'm going to probably this weekend, because this weekend we're going to be able to do some stuff at home. No, all kinds of stuff going on. So I'm going to try to do a barley twist center pedestal table, and we'll see how that comes out. That would be kind of fun. It's not something that I would turn on the lathe. I would round it on the lathe and stuff like that. But basically, I use the lathe as a jig, and it holds the workpiece, and then I do it by hand. I kind of rotate it back and forth and use files and knives and stuff like that, and carve the barley twist. I'll record parts of that and show you too, but it'll be little tiny, and so we'll see how it comes out. It should be kind of fun, and I'll do that out of the mahogany. For that, the mahogany will work fine. But for the other furniture, like I said, starting this whole thing out, for this kind of stuff, harder materials are probably better. Okay, so what else was I gonna show you? I wanted to talk about making trim, and I know we're getting into the $1:19 for time here, so we're like an hour and 19 minutes in, but I really want to talk to you about this. I've been making trim from the very start. I think that's one of the first things that I showed was how to make some trim out of wood and scrapers. I'm going to go to my other camera so I can show you what this stuff looks like. So I made some more trim, and again, trim is what we might call it now. It's classically called molding, and there's different types of molding, different kinds of trim. But to make really, really tiny trim and molding, I use this. It's a card scraper. And the actual one I used on both of these is this card scraper. And these card scrapers are very easy to make. And the process, I've shown the process before of making this trim, but basically what I'm doing is I'm making molding that I can use on furniture. And I wanted to show you what like a real molding like maker would look like. So this is a molding plane. So these are some nice molding planes that I have. I've had them for a number of years. I've got a set, and what I mean by a set is, well, this is a very small one. So this molding plane, these are all probably at least 100 years old, at least 100 years old. What it is the bottom of this is curved. And if you can, I can go a little tighter here. If you can see, that bottom is curved. So when I cut into a piece of wood with this plane, what it does is it gives me this. So if you can see that, that is crown molding. You wouldn't use this to make crown molding, but for miniature, it works perfect. So that's the smallest one that I have. Well, this is a larger one. And what you would do is you would lay out all your wood just like I'm doing here, and you would use these in combination with others. And let's go a little bit bigger here. Here's another one in my set, and this is the opposite. So you see one is concave and the other one is convex. And so in making your molding, what you would do is you would have, like you see here, you have one part of your molding that goes in, one part that goes out, and you use these different ones to create that molding. And I just thought it was fun, and I thought I would show that because what we're doing is we're using smaller tools, but we're doing the same thing. This one is, I've not trued this one up. This one still needs to be trued. I've never used it. But this molding plane, you see that? That has a pretty complex nature to it. Its profile is quite complex. Well, this thing, when it's tuned up, it will cut that profile in wood. Well, the reverse of it. So I just thought it would be kind of nice to show those because that's what we're doing. We're just not using these. We're using these, and it's the same principle. This right here is basically the blade from those molding planes without the plane around it. Should I make a miniature molding plane? I can't believe that I said that aloud because I've wanted to for a long time, and they're not, I guess they're not hard to make, but they're not easy either. And to make it so that it actually physically works would be darn difficult, but it's one of those things I've been thinking about. So yeah, I do want to make a miniature molding plane, like a little tiny one. I think it'd be a lot of fun. So anyway, so I think that's everything. And I think I've got everybody's questions. I think we're done, folks. I really, really appreciate you hanging today because, man, that was a long one with a whole bunch of stuff. I hope I was able to show you how to build, something out of wood that maybe you would do in styrene, because you could do the exact things that I did out of styrene. And with a whole bunch of good painting, you'd probably make it look like wood. 100%, you could probably do it. But I kind of like to do it out of wood. And I think, frankly, if I had to do the same process out of styrene at the end, the painting part of it, I would much rather do it out of wood. I produce my own wood because I buy big wood, and this is all scrap. All of this stuff back here is scrap. When I'm doing woodworking, I would save all my cutoffs, and I end up with some really thin stuff, and so to buy this stuff, if you don't have a table saw, kind of hard to do. You can find it in woodworking stores. You want to look for veneer. Look for veneer. That's what this would be classified as online or at a woodworking store if you're looking for something like this. They have all kinds of veneers, all kinds. You can't even imagine how many there are. Most of them, because veneers are typically used, as a figure, something to make it look beautiful. So a lot of it's like bird's eye and all this kind of crazy stuff. So to get a veneer this thin, this plain, might be a little bit more difficult to do. But if you know a woodworker, or you got somebody in your family that has a table saw, make a bunch of this stuff and it'll last forever. That's a fact. Okay, so I think that's it. Boy, thank you again for hanging on. I don't know what happened. I just hit a button and did weirdness. Very, very sorry. So thank you very much. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. I'm going to be in the shop all weekend, playing and building and doing stuff. I have had kind of a wild hair idea about building a submarine, because I have a really simple model of like a modern day Los Angeles class sub. Very simple. Just to get away from stuff and just to do like one of those palette cleanser things. I don't know if about this weekend I might, but I might. It'd be kind of fun to make some plastic again. So anyway, I hope you're doing well. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.